students, we are now taking up practical, that is, new criticism, which is also known as Anglo American practical criticism. And this background is necessary because when we start with T.S. Eliot's Tradition and Individual Talent, we understand the influences and the origin of new criticism and its assumptions and procedures and how it developed. This type of criticism, it actually arose out of the dissatisfaction of the younger generation of poets and critics with biohistorical and subjective literary criticism. And growth of formalism was also responsible, and it brought about two important developments. These factors were responsible for the growth and outcome of new criticism. I.A. Richer's Principles of Literary Criticism was published in 1924, Science and Poetry in 25, Practical Criticism in 1929. Then we have another critic, William Empson, who wrote Seven Types of Ambiguity in 1930. And then we have critical essays by T.S. Eliot and F.R. Leavice. And F.R. Leavice, in his journal titled Scrutiny, and the typical British empiricist attitude, which was established by practical criticism as a theory and method of, we can say, literary criticism, which prevailed from 1930s to 1970. These ideas for practical criticism and those critics who came under the influence of Welleck and Jacobson and who actually emigrated to the United States after the Nazi onslaught. After the Nazi onslaught, it brought about the Prague linguistic circle to the end. And this new criticism, it became a movement in America during the same period. So, some names like Ransom, Ellen Tate, Clineth Brooks, Robert Warren, they all hail from the south of the USA, and they came to be identified as new critics or identified with new criticism. But this term, new criticism, was given by Ransom in his book, The New Criticism. Now, when we talk of the crusaders of practical criticism and the new critics or new criticism, they differed from one another in many ways. But some of the assumptions and procedures were common to all. Now, we'll have a look at these assumptions. They all believed that a poem, it is held, should be treated as a poem, as an object in itself. And when we talk about Eliot, he said primarily as poetry and not as any other thing. Now, the first law of criticism, John Ransom said, is that it shall be objective and it shall cite the nature of the object. What he meant by saying this is we should recognize the autonomy of the work itself as existing for its own sake. Now, these new critics, they warned the reader against such temptations when they lose sight of the object, as when we call it intentional fallacy or effective fallacy. Because when we talk of intentional fallacy or effective fallacy, this is the problem which is inherent in trying to judge a work of art by assuming the purpose of the artist who created it. So we should not look at the intent or the purpose, why a particular poem was created. What was the intent of the writer? So this is, according to the new critics, a kind of a fallacy. So they said that in analyzing and evaluating a particular work, we actually go back to the biography of the author, the social conditions at the time of the production, or some moral or psychological effects on the reader of the text. They tried to minimize recourse to history of literary genres and the subject matter itself. Secondly, the distinctive procedure of new critic was explication, that is close reading. They believe that a detailed and subtle analysis of the complex interrelations, or when we call it ambiguities, by ambiguities we mean multiple meanings, of any component elements within a work. So, this is a formal procedure for teaching of literature. And this actually, again, we should look back that it was a very popular method in French schools. But the distinctive procedure of the new criticism, it derived from Richard's book Practical Criticism and Seven Types of Ambiguity. But they believe that detailed and subtle analysis of interrelations and ambiguities of the component elements within a work are to be considered, because this is called explication or close reading. Now, thirdly, the principles of new criticism are basically verbal. Now, what do we mean by this is that literature, they believed, is conceived to be a special kind of language. And the attributes of literature are defined by, we can say, systematic opposition to the language of sciences. And the key concepts of this criticism, it dealt with meanings and interactions of words, symbols, figures of speech, etc. Therefore, there was a great emphasis on organic unity of structure and meaning, separating the two, that is meaning and structure, separating the two. And this is what Clement Brooks called as the hearsay of paraphrasing. Fourthly, the distinction between literary genres, which we casually recognize, is not essential in new criticism. See, for example, the basic components of any work of literature, whether lyric, dramatic, narrative, are conceived to be words, images, and symbols rather than character, thought, and plot. So these linguistic elements, they are often said to be organized around a central theme. And when we are manifesting any kind of irony, paradox, or tension within the structure, this is a kind of reconciliation or equilibrium of opposed forces. So this form of a work, whether a certain work has characters or plot, it is said to be primarily dealing with the structure of meanings. And this is how they believed that casually recognition of literary genres. Let's be very clear in understanding that whatever we say about new criticism is also true of practical criticism, because both of them, practical and new criticism, they opened up a very different kind of an approach to look at texts, because they focus the attention to a text as a self-contained verbal organization. This is very important because text, they believed, is itself self-contained and it's a verbal organization. And therefore, they pointed out that potential of language in literary communication, the potential is immense. And Richard's approach to literature, we can say, that was largely empirical and not theoretical, because his experiment when he was teaching, his experiment of he asking his undergraduate students in the Cambridge he used to give anonymous poems or unsigned poems and unannotated poems to the students, sometimes even without a title. And this marked the beginning of practical criticism. So the poems stood before the students just as some words which were printed on the printed page. So it invited unconditional responses from the students. This invitation or this experiment to close reading, what we call as a close reading of the text, or we can say the true judgment, which is based on first-hand experience of the students, it completely discarded the social historical context and received the opinion or interpretation of the students from other critical sources, which gave the reading of text a kind of a practical turn. And it is said that in this kind of an approach or experimentation, the students or the readers, they are sensitized to the language of the text. They are sensitized to the language of the text. The procedures, because the critical sensibility of the reader, what happens to the critical sensibility of the student or a reader when he is reading a poem, he is invited to see the literary contexts And from those literary contexts, he would acquire some contextual meanings or contextual connotations. And they are more important because in denotative lexical meanings, because readers learn how to read a page, of course, in a literary contexts. So, practical and new criticism, in fact, to a very large extent, it brought to the forefront the focus on verbal texture, we can say imagery, and some of the best writing of Richards and Eliot's Wasteland or Principles of Literary Criticism. They all talk about this. And the work of Richards was carried out by Empson later on. And when we talk of, because he continued his work in Britain, he concentrated on the texture of the poem, which constituted by its diction and imagery. So we also have F.R. Leavice, who started his journal Scrutiny, and he took this kind of a school of criticism, practical criticism, to a great degree of refinement, because he experimented on innumerable analysis of passages, even from fiction also, not just poetry. And Eliot, Levice also, he demonstrated Eliot's claim, the claim made by Eliot in Tradition and Individual Talent. We'll be reading the essay later on. In the essay, he says that a poem communicates through its imagery and texture. So this was demonstrated by Levice, F.R. Levice. We talk of the new criticism state in USA. It is also known as formalism or intrinsic approach, because they considered poetry as poetry. That is what Eliot also said. Just treat poetry as poetry. And the pedagogical, we can say, the shift or the slant, which was very evident in Kenneth Brooks. Understanding Poetry was a work, then Understanding Fiction, then Understanding Drama, they wrote. These books presented, we can say, a variety of passages to for the students to elicit answers from them, and invited responses without relying on any information about the poet's biography or histories of literature. So ambiguity, we can say, irony, which was originally a figure of speech, and then tension, paradox, and complexity, all these terms which implied certain double principles or meanings where two elements were juxtaposed, so they were embedded into those readings. Ellen Tate, who was a new critic, he used the word tension to actually show that a poem achieves a balance, and the tension happens between extension. By extension, he meant referentiality, but something which is being referred to something, and intentionist, which denoted implication. So these theoretical frameworks, which were provided by Wimsatt, and Wimsatt also wrote the intentional fallacy and effective fallacy essays. So a lot of criticism was done, and a lot of criticism on practical criticism was done by just saying that it was lemon squeezing criticism. And language is, of course, a slippery medium, and no reader is unbiased. So whenever we have a school, we know that it was criticized, but this was just a brief outline of practical criticism. When we say that, they said language is a slippery medium, when and the new critics said that close reading of a language is explosive. So the leader is actually taken into some very unexplored areas, and areas that became very unmappable. So they said that the modern like features of interdeterminacy or endless deferral traces, etc., which happens in post-structuralism. So when a reader is an unbiased reader, there can never be an objective reading. So no reader is unbiased, so how can he read a poem or a text objectively? So according to Jacobson, who criticized the practical school of criticism, he said this is very unrealistic and just impossible. So this is how the new criticism was criticized. We will take up Eliot's stance or his place and his influences as a critic